Record. Welcome to Plan Weekly. First topic, looks like Marcin, you've got the first point.
Yep. Hi. So it's time for me to introduce myself again. This time with 12.9, I'm going to become the primary tech writer for Plan. With Russell Dickinson becoming a coach, kind of. Think of him for this one release like a docs maintainer. So all the docs work, I assign it to me, and then once I'm done, I'm going to assign to him for like a final approve and merge. So I don't know, like I've said some other things about myself before, but one thing that's important for me for how we will work together is I would ask all of you to, if you're creating a feature, to include the docs in the code MR, in the MR with code, and if there's several, maybe pick the one that you think implements the feature. And working this way, we can avoid having docs without the code merged in, or if a feature gets rolled back, having the other way. So that's me, and I don't know if you have any questions.
Oh, I do.
Sure.
So Cormac, product marketing, and on kind of the other side of me in the org is the content group as well. So they will, I think next quarter we'll have a lot more content coming out for, say, like the Agile use case. We'll have some white papers, blog posts, a bunch of that sort of thing. And content will normally contact me, and traditionally, which is weird to say since I've only been here 4 months, but traditionally what would happen is I would find the appropriate PM and ask them questions if there were things that I couldn't figure out on my own. Should I come to you for that, or should I go to the PMs, or do we know that yet?
I would probably say PMs if you ask me, but I'm also here. I've also been here 4 months, so they know the product better. I can help you with typos, but primarily the tech writers focus on the content that goes to docs.gitlab.com.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah. Having said that, I'm happy to chime in discussions of UI text. If you're when you're at the design phase. So I've chatted with some of the product designers, so they know to let me know as well.
Cool. Thanks.
Awesome. Over to Gabe.
Hi, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Where's the smiles? Come on. No, but just as for your information, we're targeting a Jira import MVC for 12.10. This is kind of like a planned stage-wide initiative that we all are going to contribute to. This is something that is strategically important to the company. The thought process is as we work towards feature compatibility, or at least solving the same business or use cases that Jira solves over the coming 12 months. It's a good idea to start with an importer, so that way we can get feedback on what the most important features are to prioritize. We're going to do that alongside our plan kind of mini cab that we're putting together, and there will be more information about that next week, where I'm talking to product marketing this afternoon, and I guess just the marketing department specifically, the customer relationship team, reference team, about how we're going to kick that off. But we have a good 7 to 10 candidates right now who want to participate in that. But it's going to be a heavy lift to get the Jira import MVC out in 12.10. So just raising awareness so that everybody can contribute to that. Hopefully, whenever we get some plans a little bit more firmed up, that's going to be hard in 12.10 because we also have contribute that release. So just as a heads up, it's coming down the pipe. Is there any questions about that or things that people want to discuss? Questions? All right,
did
next
have one.
sorry, what was that?
Yeah, it's me, Alexandro. I do have one. How does that Jira import correlate with the ecosystem integration Jira phase? Are we going to work with them? Is that some sort of overlap with that team?
Yeah, it's not in so much as like we can collaborate with them. They have too much on their plate right now, and the import team within the import group within Manage has too much on their plate right now, and they're focusing on Jenkins importer. And so the basic gist is because those other two teams won't be able to get to this for like 6 months or longer. Sid and the product leaders said that we should take it on and do it. How we work with them is up to us. I would say specifically related to the integration that exists, there's a couple of them, but those are mostly syncing GitLab objects to Jira and not the other way around, if that makes sense.
Oh, okay. That was my next question. Sort of, I know that we have some sort of integration, and yeah, what is covered there and what is not covered there.
Yeah, so there's two of them. I think the most recent one was the Jira panel integration, and that will let you attach merge requests, branches, and commits to a Jira ticket in a sort of semi-automated fashion. So this is kind of the inverse, where we want people to be able to import all of their issues to Jira, or I mean to GitLab from Jira, as well as like users and things like that. So the technical account management team and customer success have written an importer in Python. So we have some working template to go off of, but it's all based on like importing an XML backup, which I think we might be trying to go more of like an API driven way. So it just depends, but the goal in the MVC, I think, is to build an importer that our teams can use, like the TAMs and solutions architects for migrating folks over to GitLab, still in like a sort of hands-on approach. And then over time that will evolve into more of a self-service migration tool for them. But that's the basic TLDR.
Cool, thanks.
We also have a current Jira integration that allows you to close or transition Jira issues based on, I think it's comments in GitLab issues, which makes me think that we can probably reuse some of that authentication logic, because that would, although that's the other direction, it shows that we're establishing a connection with both with the API, the Jira API, and with their regular, oh yeah, I've forgotten. But anyway, yeah, I think like we should be able to reuse some components from that point of view, at least some of the authentication stuff that's already in GitLab.
Yep. From what I've been reading, I spent most of the day in reading Jira API documentation yesterday. The authentication happens just with an email address and a API token, which is the user password, basically. So I guess it's some flavor of basic auth, but with an API token instead of traditional password. But yeah, as much as we can reuse, please let's do it. And that also means that we'll probably overlap with ecosystem to a certain degree. I've also been including Harris, who is the PM in the import group within Manage, just so like we can make sure that we're not going too far outside the bounds or doing a bunch of rework that we don't need to do. I think I have the next issue, and I've brought this up a couple times in my weekly like kind of touch points with the engineering managers in Plan. It's the idea of like work in progress limits and what are they? And I think we're trying to get better at using them. And so I just want to have like a general conversation to see what people, how they like viewed them, what they thought about them, and like if they understood the goal of doing it. Because I think, I have a strong opinion about work in progress just from like a systems theory standpoint and queuing theory, and have experienced the benefits of doing so. But I also know that there are lots of challenges to overcome within GitLab and how we work asynchronously and like just the general flow of issues to MRs over time. And so I was just curious if like for it to work, everybody has to buy in, and for everybody has to buy in, like we need to have a conversation about it. So I guess I just wanted to have that conversation with everyone here. Get some input, feedback.
suppose I would ask, like, any of the engineers on the call, like, have they encountered WIP limits before? Have you noticed them on the boards? Has it made any difference to your workflow so far?
I haven't personally, but maybe others did.
Do we have the work in progress limits already?
I guess that answered your question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if, so we have the work in progress limits on the main plan board that has every workflow stage in it. I think on the engineering side, we may be using different boards, and we haven't moved that down to those boards. So maybe we should. So I think maybe that should be a question. Should we all be working off the same, like not just the build board, but the same full board? And if not, should we have WIP limits for some of the other boards that are taken from that main board?
I think the way that I look at it is like we need to follow some sort of a process at this point, and it doesn't have to be heavy-handed, but like we could either move towards doing, and the reason why a process is important is it helps us set expectations externally. And to the point the process doesn't help us do that, then it's not super meaningful. But we could either go the approach of a Kanban where we work continuously, or we can look at like doing time boxes like Scrum. And I think work in progress limits are helpful to both, but more so for Kanban. And the whole, like one of the tenets of Kanban is like you visualize your work, like all the work in progress basically on an issue board. And I think it's helpful if you all look at the same thing. But I looked at some of our billboards, and I think they're just like, it's more or less a subset of the bigger board, and it has just some specific workflow stages. So in that case, like that's not a big deal because it's essentially the same view, just in this part of it. And in that case, I would say, yes, we would want to have work in progress limits on that. But in order to do that, I think everyone needs to understand like the goal of the work in progress limit, and then what to do whenever you can't start a new issue because there's already too much work in progress across like the team, you know? So
I think, Alexandra, you put in the agenda that you're using the plan project management build board, which to me looks really similar to this board. And it's this board that has the WIP limits attached to it. The reason we didn't have a board like this for Portfolio and Certify was that it's one team for two groups. And up until now, we haven't had the not matcher. So now that we have that, we can have a board similar to this one for the other side of the team. We just say, give me everything in plan, not project management, and we can have stuff for that side of the team. So unless I'm mistaken, I think that this project management Kanban board is the one with the WIP limits.
it is. You could also put them on the other board too. It's just like you have to make sure you maintain that in two places, which is not the end of the world.
One's back end and one's all. We could, yeah. We could probably slim down the number of boards that we have.
And I mean, the WIP limits that we've defined for the most part, at least until we kind of experiment with it, is like one issue per engineer on the team. So even if we split, like even if we have separate boards for front end and back end, which we probably want to get away from, like it probably makes more sense just to have one board, and then we can filter by front end and back end if we need to. But if we want to still have separate boards, we can manually calculate our current WIP limits fairly easily.
Yeah, the basic philosophy is like you have your ready for development, and most of the items in there don't have anything assigned to people. And then whenever there's a space that's free, like let's say right now I'll just share my board screen real quick. So on the project management board, like in dev, we set a work in progress limit of 10, which more or less like represents no total count front end engineers and back end engineers. And so we're 24 over right now, which means like you can't start anything new until the in dev gets below 10, so at 9. And then when it would get to 9, then you could pull over the next item off the top and start working on that. And you kind of just work in a 4-strength way. And then each week we get together. It could even be in this call, which would be beneficial. We look at everything that is like ready to be scheduled or ready to be worked on, and we talk about the priorities and we decide on them. And then we like move those into ready for development when there's room. And so like it's kind of just like a flow of continuous flow of issues. I think the challenge is when you get in here of like, let's say, right now there's 24 issues. You only have 1 in this list. You finish it, and then what do you work on? And I think the idea is that sorry, my screen is refreshed so much. Is that you then like move on to see like how can I help unblock some other people, or how can I contribute to what some of these other issues your people are working on, so that we can help like them move through. And then if you end up like getting blocked on one of these issues and it can't move, instead of just like moving it over to blocked and starting on something new, you bring up the fact that it's blocked, and then like everyone on the team does what they can to help get you unblocked. So like instead of just like kind of pushing things aside and waiting, it's more or less like we're gonna all like collaborate together to figure out how to get you unblocked. It's the same way that Toyota production system was developed by Taiichi Ohno back in the day, and they call it pulling the end on cord when you stop, because if there's like a block or a quality issue, and then everybody like works to fix that and improve the process, and then they like go back to working on things. So that would be a cool concept to try. But I think it's also like particularly challenging being async first, and like it's hard to figure out how to communicate that in a way that people can like understand and contribute to in a timely manner. So there's challenges, but I think it'd be interesting to see how we can improve the processes that we use. So anybody have any thoughts about work in progress limits, the idea of them, pushback? I mean, this is a team thing, so I'd like us all to talk about it.
I mean, maybe I'm a little biased because I spent time building it, but I actually really like the idea of it. I think it's just kind of a combination of what you said, Gabe and Donald, is like having it accessible on the different boards, and then like getting used to the process and then doing the process. But I think we're all at this point where it's like, yeah, we know they're there, but we're not utilizing it. So I don't know how we could move forward on like what you just walked through, Gabe, like, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. And then let's have like a mindset around, okay, cool. So if we're blocked, we're over limit, we can't pull something in and talk about that and then keep iterating. And then I think maybe people will start using it more. Because right now I just kind of feel like, yeah, I know it's there, but I'm not actively thinking about it. Like, oh, we're over on this. Like I shouldn't go pull this in. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I do like, I'm open to try it out, but like I do have a bit of the doubts regarding how efficient we're going to be with this, because when there is a bigger or a couple bigger issues that are sort of blocking on being resolved, well, yeah, like I don't know, maybe. So like, I'm thinking right now, like for instance, the issue that Charlie is working on, where there is quite a bit of back and forth and deciding the one with the calculation of the sums and counts. So it's kind of a complicated issue. So maybe that's one instance. There are 10 more that can be solved and pulled off of the in-dev column, and then it's kind of open to work on. But if there are several such issues, pretty much all you can do is give some suggestions, but then that's open up to the developer to implement it and finish it. And that does take time. So what do you do in the meantime? Collaborating is great. Like you can, as I said, post commands and suggestions and ideas, which takes, I don't know, half an hour, an hour. And then what do you do next? So in this sort of a thinking manner was what I'm concerned with. But yeah, let's give it a try.
I think that's where some of the other things that, value adding activities would be like we have the planning breakdown column and so we don't move things out of that until it's like looked at by an engineer and we talk about how we're going to implement it, or like at least there's a plan and there's a weight on there. And that way we know like how to prioritize it and where to prioritize it and that like it's feasible. So one thing you could do is if you're blocked and there's like you can't pull a new issue in, is you can go work on like breaking some of those issues down. So that way we can move them out of the planning thing and into scheduling and getting them ready for development. The other thing that I was curious about is that in my previous company, we were pretty big on pair programming. And it worked because we were in relatively at least plus or minus 3 hour time difference always. I don't think it's the same, like it's not as feasible at GitLab, which is fine. But what would it look like if like, to collaborate, like for two engineers to collaborate on a single issue, like the one you were talking about with Charlie? Like, let's say that she's working on something and she like pushes up her code at the end of the day and it's clear like what the next steps are and another engineer can contribute to that, like and work on it in tandem. So that way, like if we're always pushing our code up onto a merge request or a branch or whatever, then it's almost like it could be possible to collaborate on a single issue to help move it forward more quickly. I don't know the feasibility of that, but it's an interesting idea to think about.
Yeah, and one more aspect. I was jumping to show up the Charlie's example, but then there is my example where I'm working on a bunch of the migrations, which I don't know why, but like the migrations seem to take a lot of MR seem to take quite a bit of time, even though we have a lot of well, not a lot, but more DB maintainers. Anyway, so there was this back and forth between kind of the issue being in review, or the MR being in review, and then we're making some changes, putting it back in review, getting back some feedback from either backend maintainers or reviewers, and from database maintainers and reviewers. So that's some back and forth. When I think we're currently not moving the issue back and forth. And some of my issues like stay in review while I'm still doing work on them, which I'm not sure how that like works out with the work in progress limits and so on. So just to kind of bring awareness that that's one other aspect where I'm like not like I didn't have too much availability, so to say, to collaborate on the in-depth probably issues, because I'm sort of still busy with the in-review ones that I'm still working on.
Yep. I think that's I would like to get to the point where we have work in progress limits in review as well. So let's say you're working on something in dev and like your work in progress limit for in review issues. Then like the next thing is how can we get one of those reviews done? So instead of like waiting, 48 hours to get a reviewer to respond, then like you can go and review one of like another engineers within plans that MR and try to collaborate with them to get it through more quickly. And I think that's where like you kind of have work in progress limits for each process in the workflow, and review is one of those. And I think that's where that's totally fine if you can't pick something up in dev. Like you ideally want to prioritize the things that are at the furthest right on the board. So like verification, review are the most important things to get done first. And then you work on the things that are in dev. That's the most important thing. And then you kind of slowly work from right to left. Because if you think about like a pull system, you're like trying to pull value down the workflow process basically. So I think that's a valid concern. That's also something that can be addressed sort of by work in progress limits too.
Cool, thanks.
Is it okay if I keep bringing this up until we like? I don't want to be annoying, but also like, it's kind of like what Scott said. You have to like, it's a mindset shift more than anything else, and it's like a level of discipline that, like I think it just takes practice and iteration. Is it okay if I like bring this up on a weekly basis just to see how we're doing with it and have a touch point about how we can improve the process?
Yep.
Because I'd like to, but I don't want to be annoying. So.
Well, I want to like echo that. Like we should be talking about things we can improve. weekly if possible, right? So, you brought up, like, we've got a couple larger issues, like, the one Charlie's working on. And, the question I want to ask is, well, what are we doing now to help those get across the line that we can then learn from and say those were effective tactics? So yeah, what are we doing with that one? I guess is my question. Like, what can we learn from that overall? And, let's get it across the line and then say, all right, this is what we could have done better, and this is what we did well that kind of pulled it across the line.
We might want to have more of a retro on that one with the people that are more directly involved with that. I think that'd be helpful than us kind of talking a little more secondhand about that here, if you're okay with that, Keen. We're talking about the specific Charlie one.
Yeah, because Charlie's unable to join this call, so I get that. But yeah, as long as we can have that conversation and try to figure out ways to help get that one moving.
Cool. And then also, as far as continuing to bring this up, I do agree that yes, we want to keep bringing up stuff, improvements essentially. But I think it also would help to document some of the stuff we're talking about, maybe just in our planned product page, and then we can have some of the conversations around either the MR or an issue there, just for the people that are not involved in this call.
Okay, I'm going to make a to-do for myself to do that. To-do, Gabe.
But you just add it to the weekly format, right? Just make it a standing part of the agenda.
Yeah. All right, cool. I think we're good with that. Don't want to be a dead horse. I have the next item. I ran just like a quick analysis on the like type of work we're delivering over the last, I guess since 12.5. And it's like 75% of all the MRs were bugs, tech deck, or backstage. I think 50-ish% on average was about the backstage, and then 25% bugs, 25% tech deck, give or take a few percentage points. Question I had was, is this the ideal ratio? Like, it was hard for me to understand what's the difference between backstage and tech debt, and what are like the things that, like, and I see some of the comments down there. Like if an MR is against like a feature issue, should it also have the feature label on it every time or not? And I just kind of like wanted to have a talk about that, because it's part of helping me understand, like, are we spending a bunch of time fixing stuff that like is truly technical debt, or things that are like kind of just chores, or are we really spending our time doing feature development or like contributing to end user value, even if it's not something immediately visible, I guess, if that makes sense. So wanted to have a quick conversation on that and see like what the ideal ratio was, and all that good stuff.
Jan, you wanna?
Yeah, I just let to know that at least currently I mark also MRs which are part of a bigger feature, but for example, update just a backend or model or something like this, which is not exposed to user. I mark this as backstage. But as Keenan pointed out, it's probably not ideal, and we could use feature for these MRs too. So probably it's just something to change on engineering side, or at least on my side. At this point, I think this metric is influenced by this, that some MRs are labeled in a wrong way by backstage. But in future, it could be easily changed.
Yep, I would echo that as well. I think a lot of the backend stuff that goes towards a feature, like you do work on backend stuff that is in advance of of making the front end or so is not really labeled as a deliverable. So probably that kind of skips this kind of metrics. I know for myself, I'm working on these migrations that do work towards having that notification center and a lot of other stuff, but that's like, I don't think any of those issues or MRs are marked.
Yeah, I'd also be interested in looking at it from the weight distribution side of things, like in a milestone, how much weight have we, out of all the weight that we completed, how much of that is dedicated to features versus backstage versus bugs. I feel like that'll give us a little bit more of a real number than what we're currently doing, because I think we are using backstage for a lot of things that should be feature work. So 2 points. I think, yes, we should update our MR throughput labels to be features if they're, even if they're backstage, but tied into a feature. But 2, I think we should evaluate this on the weight side, on the velocity side. Also, I'm wondering, and Gabe, you actually asked the question, you said 50-60% features. I kind of agree with you where it can probably be a little bit higher than that, but we should discuss what we think our ideal percentage of work should be on features versus backstage versus bugs. And then to add to that, also percentage of work that we're spending on stuff outside of product responsive product work, product deliverables, meaning global OKRs, other teamwork. Like, we should have that discussion also.
Yeah, I think part of the reason why it would be helpful for me in particular, like I have to set dates, like years out in advance, months out in advance of when we're going to hit some sort of like category maturity. And I think we're trying to clean that process up a little bit. But if I'm going to like break down, I don't know, like 7 features and think about like, you know, what the weight is on that, or get engineers to weigh in on like this, and we get some total weight value, then like we can use that to see like what percentage of features are we delivering each release, and then we can use that to calculate some rough like delivery windows out into the future that, you know, are only going to be as accurate as like our labels are on our issues, you know, and our actual velocity on the different kinds of work. And I don't want to I didn't bring this up because I think we should just be shipping more features. I think performance and like quality code and all of those things are incredibly important, but it's more like we do have to set expectations, and it helps do that if we have good data on the ratio of things we're shipping, you know?
Just on that as well, like the guidance in the handbook is copied into the agenda there, that anything that contributes to a feature should be considered a feature, should be marked with a feature label, and also it's higher priority in the list. If you read in the handbook, you know, you should go down through the list in the order that they're presented, starting with community contribution, bug, and then feature. However, in my opinion, if something is basically a regression introduced in a feature that hasn't been shipped yet, in other words, it's behind a feature flag and that feature flag is defaulted to off, then I don't really think that should be considered a bug until it's shipped. So like if you quickly fix a bug that's introduced and nobody has experienced it yet, it's probably fine to label that an addition to the feature, in my opinion. On the other hand, there's a chance, I guess, like if you're building a feature and you come across a piece of sort of ugly code, I personally think it's okay to press on with the feature and get it into review and then come back and refactor that piece of code. Even might encourage people to do that, because typically velocity of getting the feature into the review process that's a worthwhile trade-off. I don't know if you'd agree, Gabe, but if it comes to getting the feature into review earlier and then onto maintainer review, and then shipping the small refactor in a later MR. Personally, I think that's kind of better. The second MR will be easier to review anyway because it'll be smaller.
I agree with that some of the time too. I think like if getting it into review is a good thing to do, and then I also think it's a good idea to just like, if depending on how big it is, like if it's a 2-hour effort just to do it, like just do it. You know, I would rather things go a little bit slower, because what I've seen end up happening is that we'll get like something shipped, and then there's like these two issues like, oh, they get spawned off that to address it later, but then those don't get scheduled for like a really long time, and then you might like lose some of the context that you had when you were in the code writing that, like in that specific part of the code. And so I think that's where, like, if you can align some of the refactoring with the features that you're doing, then it will, like, that's typically how I've always worked, is like you deliver user facing features and then you do whatever refactoring you have to do along with that to make sure that like you're improving the quality of the code. So like it's a judgment thing, I would say, depending on what it is, but I also like just improving things as we go. And I don't mind if it goes a little bit slower. That's my prerogative.
In reality, I think our review process is quite thorough. So not too many features that do require a lot of later on refactoring pass through, I would like, from my own experience. So
that's good. Anything else that we want to touch on for this? Okay, I think I had the last item, and this more relates to like, how are we as like a stage level team tracking performance of the features that like performances in like the engineering server load, like is it performant in production? How are we tracking that and going back to make sure that we're like continually optimizing things as we go? I say that because I would like to get to the point where any of the views within our product load within a second, which I know is like nuts and a moonshot, but it's also, there's a pretty direct correlation, and I can dig up all the research between perceived performance of an application and lovability of it. And I think that's where like I would like us all to at least know where to look for these things and then like care about it together. So this is more of a question for the engineers, I suppose.
Well, you're in luck because we have Ruby on Rails performance training going on at the minute with Nate Barkpack. So like the awareness of our Grafana dashboards should become ever more present after this.
Sweet.
Yeah, we use Grafana dashboards, also use the performance bar day to day just to check number of SQL queries on given pages, number of Gitly calls. But that's not like monitoring, that's just sort of instant feedback, if you like. The Grafana dashboards and to some extent Kibana as well. You can use Kibana to you can use it to get much smaller windows basically, because after that, you know, it becomes quite not performant and difficult to get any stats out of it. Nevertheless, it is. We've done it a couple of times actually. I'm blanking on the last time we did it, but we measured performance of some stuff after we shipped it to make sure that our assumptions about the thing were correct. It might have been actually moving stuff from REST to GraphQL to ensure that the same or fewer SQL queries were called. I'll get a link to the Grafana dashboard. Thanks for the...
It's just dashboard.gitlab.org or .net or something, right?
There's two. There's dashboards.net, I think, is the internal one, and .com, I think, is the public one.
You can also use the performance bar if you want to see real-time numbers by typing PV within GitLab.
Yeah, because I'd be okay. Like if we, you know, I know we're trying to increase our MR throughput. Like if there's a quick performance win that we just like can open an MR for and address, like that would be sweet.
So I think like there's plenty of that's a really good point, Gabe. And I think in terms of our group, like we're monitoring at a larger company level, but I think if there are views that are either visited by users more than not, or maybe we've noticed that there's a huge performance lag on a certain page, that we could identify that and then start investigating. Because if we just say like, let's just improve performance, there's plenty of things we can do. There's lots of things in Vue that, like I know Simon was investigating this, like because of the amount of Vue wrappers we had, it was destroying our performance on one of the pages to inspect the like web ID, like some web ID. So there's like engineering initiatives, and then there's like plan specific things that we can identify and like start looking at. Something that comes off the top of my head, looking at an issue, I don't think we're observing this, like the viewport of a user, and we're just loading all the discussions. So that's like a low hanging fruit. That's something that I noticed, but the implementation details, I'm not sure. So maybe there's somewhere we can like keep track of that for a plan, identify it, schedule it, and then go after it. I don't know. There's just an idea.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges with that is when you have a deep link into a specific comment, how do you know to load things in a asynchronous paginate, like almost auto paginated way for the discussions? But I agree with that. That's something that is worth optimizing. I've also noticed that the issue board loads twice.
Yeah, no, totally. Like these, but that's exactly what I'm talking about, right? Like these are things that we notice that we can measure and then improve.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm playing around with OKRs for our stage, and like one of them has to do with just like the quality of our product, and both like in how many defects we create, but also the performance of it. And I think it's important for everyone to care a lot about that. I care a lot about it, and I'm willing to go slower on features to get a better quality, higher performant product, if that makes sense. So.
Sure.
That is an excellent OKR, and I would love for that to just improve the performance of our app as an OKR. Maybe we should add that as until we get the team-based OKRs. I'm wondering if maybe we should have that, John, looking at you and me, as a engineering OKR.
Why don't you guys think about drafting it, and then we can, I have a, let me find it right quick. I have a issue in the plan project talking about OKRs, and I would love for you guys just to edit the description, add to there, so we can take it and champion it for like the stage level thing. Because I'll tell you what will end up happening inevitably is as we continue to scale, we get more folks onto .com. What will happen from a financial standpoint is the cost of operating .com will increase steadily, and then the gross margins across the company will start to like shrink because it will cost more to run that infrastructure. And then at some point, maybe like in 12 to 24 months, the company will be like, oh my gosh, we're spending way too much money on this. And then they'll go across the board and do like a ton of optimizations to reduce the costs. So this is like, if we can start thinking about it now, it'll help maybe alleviate that, at least as far as like our stage is concerned, and hopefully propagate it outward. But it does have a huge direct financial cost, especially as we scale .com. So worth thinking about.
And with dog fooding, I mean, we use issues so much. Like I want, I want faster load times. It'll just help our job, our day to day. So. Cool. That looks like the final topic. Anyone have anything else? No? Okay. Great meeting, like always. Talk to everyone again later.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.